Tea time! Chai tea for two. In Chai Tea for Two, you are a team merchant, and you're going against one another or as a solo. In this game, you are completing tea clipper contracts to fulfill your boats and ship your tea overseas. We are now going to do an overview of a round. If you want to skip ahead to a replayability review, you can do that. So for setup of this game, we are playing on the A side of the board. We're using the A side of our character cards. For myself, I get 1 point for every card or ship that gets a white tea. And Matthias will have 1 point for the green tea.
I have a green thumb.
The first thing we do on a round is we take our tea assistant and we get to move up to 3 spaces clockwise, or on the first round, we can move anywhere. So here I'm going to choose the 4 with a green and a white. Okay. So each of us will get a green and a white. And then we have the choice of 4 different resources, or we can choose movement up to 4.
And we can break it up too, right? So
absolutely.
I can do 2 and 2? Okay.
So I'm going to take an extra white and an extra green, because you're allowed to have them one of any kind. And then I'm going to take 2 movement. So I'm going to take my 2 green, and I'm going to move them up. And I'm going to leave these ones down.
I'll take a purple and a yellow, and I will take only 2 resources and move up 2 spots.
We will now roll our die. Here we have, if in the marketplace, you can at any time, oh, this should have gone over and flipped. At any time, you can take 1 die and choose 1 resource of any kind. Here, you have to meet the number or be greater than or equal to the numbers here to grab those cards.
And if you use a 6, you can look at this card and 2 other cards and choose one of the 3 and then put the 2 cards you don't want back in order.
Absolutely. And this is an instant area. Mm-hmm. At the palace, if we have cards surrounding our board, we are able to move them around. Here we are able to switch 2 cards. Here you can take first player, which can be very important if you need to flip over a card to reactivate it.
Flip over all your cards.
Here at the harbor, you need sequences, and people can bump you out.
So for example, if I put 1, 2 here, I could claim that ship unless someone outbids me.
And here you need to have sets. So pairs, triples, or quadruples of the same number. And 3 dice will trump 2, even if the value is higher. So on my first turn, I am going to take a 4 pip, and I'm going to put it here, because I want this card, and I'm going to put it beside my green leaves, green tea, and it's going to bump it up. So if you have a card beside a space with that color of tea, it does move it up.
Just because Lisa, we've played this so many times now, I know she likes to come here and grab the cards. I need to get ahead of that. You can place a dice here. It's the number or higher. So I'm going to put a 5 where the 4 is. I'm going to grab this purple, and I'm going to put it there. And because I've done that, it bumps my purple up 1 space. And these are the cards that you don't have to flip. We didn't bring out a flip card, but there are cards in the deck where if you use them once.
Right here. This one here, you use it once, so that one gives you the opportunity to bump up a purple twice. But when you use it, you do have to flip it upside down.
You have to flip it over, and the only way you get it back is to use that slot. Okay?
So here, I am going to take my 2 4s, and I'm going to put them here for movement. So he can still bump me out. I'm not guaranteed the 5 movement, but I have chosen to go to the production area.
Yeah, I could bump up at the first later in the game. This definitely becomes very important. The first few rounds, I don't find it as important, so I'm not going to compete with you there, but I'm going to go for this ship here where I have to deliver a yellow, a black, and a white, but it also gives me 7 points, so I'm going to at least bid for it. We'll see if I get outbid.
All right, well, now that I know he has done that, I am going to bid on this ship, which lets me use any 3 types of tea, but because it's not specific, it does only give me 3 points.
And we find those on the B side of the board are probably a little more powerful than the A side of the board. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead. Now, I kind of outsmarted myself because I used my 5 here, but I want that card as well just for later on. So I'm going to take my 4 and I'm going to throw away a resource to move up 1 pip. You can do that on a turn. So I'm going to turn my 4 into a 5. I'm going to go over there and I will grab the Earl Grey. I don't have a good place to put it right now, so I will put it down there. This one's worth a victory point at the end of the game. The cards can really add up.
So I'm going to use my 5 pip on the 2, and I'm going to take this blooming tea. So this is where set collection comes in. And if you have 1 blooming tea, it's worth 1 point. And if you have 2, it's 3, and so on.
Okay. Well, I'm going to use my 4. I'm going to grab this card. I'm going to put it here. So I get to go up 2. Now the purple on the A side of the board, you have to go a little bit of a long way. I can't just go straight up here. So I have to go 1, 2 movement, which is what this card allows. And then I flip it over. And as we discussed, the only way I get that back later on is by flipping it in that 1 spot.
So I have 1 die left. And with my 1 die, I'm going to go here. And this allows me to move one of my cards. So I'm going to move my green up. Now it gets activated and it will bounce these 2 tea leaves up closer to my docks.
Well, I have a pair of 1s. It's not a great move, but the 1s, there's not much left for me on the board, I feel. So I'm going to come here. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take my 2 1s. I'm allowed to do this more than once around,
yes,
right?
You are.
I'm going to throw out my yellow. Actually, I'll throw out my green. And I'm going to turn this into a 1-2. And I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to reserve that ship as well. I feel it's a higher value play at this
All right. Well, now that we are both out of dice, the first thing we do at the end is we get to resolve the harbor. So, because nobody else tried to outbid me here, I get to claim this ship for myself, and I get to put it in one of my 3 docks. And Matthias gets to claim his 2 ships.
I like it. And you'll see the difference in points. Hers is only worth 3, but this one with 4 resources, 10 points. So it's a little bit harder to fill, but it's drastically better in terms of points.
And then we go to the production area. So for the production area, I get 5 movement. So I'll take my dice back, and I get 5 movement. So I could move these in, but for right now, I think I'm going to start getting my white up the board. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to just take 1 more up for 5.
And I think that was a smart move because you can always move this card.
Absolutely.
Right
that was my plan for next round. Move this card here, and then I would be able to load my 2 green. So that is 1 round of Chai Tea for 2. We have the prototype of Chai Tea for 2, but if this is anything to say what the final product is going to look like, it is of a high quality. The meeples are individually cut and very nice and colorful. The containers come with embossed lids, and they're tin.
And I think this is an add-on for the campaign, but these dice trays, get them. They're awesome. So we're all about replayability. So Lisa, what are your thoughts on the replayability? And let's just kind of go almost bit by bit. Dice placement, I always find, adds a bunch of replayability just unto itself.
Absolutely. This is a dice placement board, and the pips do matter. So there are opportunities for you to mitigate your dice, but they will limit you as to what you can do based on having to throw away resources in order to mitigate those dice.
Yeah, the cool thing with this game with the dice, though, is higher dice do matter, but you can still do a lot with, like, 2s, like, for example, because the one area where you're getting the ships, a 1-2 will get you a ship. Or the places where you can move up the board, you could have a pair of 1s and you could take top place. So it's a different game where it's not always about pips. Sometimes it's just as much about getting numbers in sequence or getting pairs.
The plantation cards in this game also offer a lot of variability because you only have the option of 6 cards. There is a way to get 8, to see 8 cards, but it can limit you based on the colors of resources you have, so you might have to come up with a different strategy in order to move those resources up your board.
Yeah, the cool thing about the plantation cards is you put them down and they basically give you a free movement for whatever color of tea you have. So if I have the green tea one, it helps me move up one. But I also have the ability to move that over to another side of my board. Some of the more powerful ones that give you extra movement, you flip them, so you have to flip them back. So there's lots of variability in just kind of how you want to initially set up your board and then kind of like move your board around to try to get your tea up to the docks.
And then it also comes down to the ships you have. So just because you have lots of green tea, if you don't have a ship that can take green tea, maybe you use that tea to mitigate those dice.
Yeah, and sometimes we've played that we don't even have to ship as much as we have to, because the cards will give you points. There's also the crates that give you points. So you can earn points in other ways other than just shipping.
At the beginning of every round, you have the tea assistant, and you get to select one space for him at the market. This will give you 2 resources and a certain amount of movement. Now, there are some strategies to use when selecting this. Matthias, what are your normal strategies?
Well, it depends on what I'm trying to do versus what you're trying to do. For example, if I choose the 2 resources with 5, you can do 5 movement or 5 resources. If she's close to shipping, I want to make sure that I can choose something as low as possible to mitigate her trying to move her stuff up. Conversely, if it's kind of the opposite, I want more movement and it's not that much of a detriment to give her a little bit, then I'll take it. So I pay attention to my board, but I also definitely have to be paying attention to her board, which is kind of cool because that's what makes the game interactive.
The game comes with a lot of options to advance your playstyle as well. So the basic game, there are A sides of the boards of players, and it's quite simple, easy to learn. But then you can get into some of the more advanced sections of this game. So opportunities for advancement would be the player boards. So you can have the basic side of the board, the A side, or you can flip it over to the B side.
Yeah, I don't want to say the A side is basic. I think it's a lighter game on the A side, but I would say it's like a 2.25 weight, or it's like kind of like that lighter weight. But when you flip it over, you're getting into almost like a medium game. And a lot of the cards drastically change, I find, within it. Do you find that? Like, so shipping, I find a lot easier on the A side as opposed to the B side.
Absolutely. And I think the points on the shipping cards are definitely more streamlined for playing the B side. The variation in points, I think, is better distributed on the B side.
So maybe you can explain the difference between shipping an A and B.
Sure. So shipping an A, you can load any kind of tea from any port. Whereas when you get to the B side, it gets really strategic because you end up having to, you get certain teas, then as they move up your board, you can oxidize them and actually change them into different types of tea. But then at the very top of the board, when you're loading your tea at the docks, you have to have your ship in the right dock in order to load it. So you need to use some of your movement points to actually move the ships around to get each type of tea. So when you have a ship that carries 3 different kinds of tea, you may need 3 movement.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other side, or on the A side, you just need enough movement to get the tea physically into the boat.
And I find on certain ships, like I'm just staring at the Dartmouth right here, on the A side of the board, you could load it all right at the top and have no issues just from the one area. On the B side of the board, all 3 the resources are at different ports. So you'd have to move your boat 2 different times and then also fill it up. So that definitely becomes more strategic. I also find the crates play very differently, A versus B. The crates, you basically take, let's say it wants a purple and a yellow, you can fill it up at the bottom on the A side fairly easily. On the B side, you have to move it again because the yellow is on the left, purple can be, maybe purple is a bad example, but black is on the right. So you have to kind of move that around as well. So I find that it just becomes more of a thinky game on B than it does on A.
Absolutely. Definitely a little more crunchiness to your decision making on that B side. And I think that's where you get a little bit more of the puzzle aspect of this game. And you still have the option of doing some set collection from those blooming teas. So for us, we find that B side really gives us the depth of game that we're looking for.
For sure. But I really appreciate almost having 2 different games in the box because depending on what kind of gamer you are, you might never leave A and the other side you might play A a couple times and just go right to B. But if you were playing this game with, like, let's say your mother likes lighter games.
Absolutely.
You can definitely just bring this out on the A side and play it with her. Conversely, if you're at a board game group or something like that and you're playing against somebody that likes more medium heavy, you can just kind of explain the B and go right over to the B side. So you really have different options, and I think that opens up the different kind of people you can play the game with. That's up quickly too. Like, when you really think about replayability, obviously you have what the game is, but who can you play the game with, and how long does it take to set up? Are always kind of playing it. How long does it take you to learn the rules? And I think, at least from people you can play with, how long it takes to learn the rules and setup are all fairly quick.
Yes, and the rule book itself is well laid out, easy to follow.
For sure.
So you'll be able to get it from shrink to table very quickly as well.
Definitely. Last thing we should add, this game has a solo. I like my solo games, especially when she's whooping me in most of the games that we have. So within the solo game, you get a deck of cards, which kind of acts as the AI, and you can either play on the easy mode, which they basically every year the deck will do a prescribed action based on what you roll, or you can kind of shuffle it up for variability. So it's nice to have that in a 2-player box to have the solo-only mode as well. So what do you think, Lisa? Will this stay in the collection long term?
I think it will. It is a really solidly developed game for theme, and I love the color. Definitely one I can see pulling out, and like you said, playing with my mom. Definitely has that mom feel to it, but it's a solid game for gamers as well as somebody just getting introduced to the game.
Yeah, it's like 2 games, 1 box, and then you throw in the solo as well. I think you get a lot of value in here. You can get a lot of plays out of this before you get tired of it.
Absolutely. So for our collection, this game goes the distance.